Welcome everyone. Good to be here in November with all of you. And today we will be talking about the spirits of nature. On the one hand, that relates to the nature spirits like Pan and the nymphs and the Bacchae, etc., which I'll explain. But more importantly, I want to talk a little bit about this principle of like the different, the different gods and goddesses, the different pantheons, the archetypes, how they fit into, let's say, a bigger picture of the transcendent god, goddess, the transcendent divinity, and then how this fits in to this principle of the different archetypes, spirits, etc. And the basic principle is, if we kind of look to Hinduism, for example, as an influence, we can say that the archetypes, the nature spirits, etc., are part of the sort of Vishnu body, which is the sustainer god, the god of this world, the god of our lives here. Whereas the Shiva principle, for example, is the principle of spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and then access to the transcendental. So, this is something I've thought a lot about, is like, how do we reconcile those two different aspects? The very embodied gods and goddesses that are here, and then this kind of transcendent, this kind of transcendent Godhead. And I think that's they are both equal, they're not opposite, it's kind of the same thing. The archetypes, the pantheons, are the gods and the goddesses that we work with here in this world to help make our existence in this world more conscious. But there's always that bigger transcendent Godhead that is our inspiration, that is where we come from, and the place that we go back to after we leave this physical body and this physical world. So I think it's a very interesting topic. There's power to be had from both. There's obviously, first of all, everything is in the divine mind and the divine being of God. There's not a separation between incarnated and transcendent divinity. The greater God kind of works through this material expression that we have. But the transcendent God or goddess is kind of a very different energy to the incarnated gods and goddesses. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we reconcile those. They are very complementary. In some ways they might seem to be at odds in some way, but it's actually all the same consciousness, just stepped down to different levels. So we'll talk about that. We'll also, at the end of the session, we'll do a visualization around place. But I want to talk a little bit first, give a little bit of theory first before we go into the visualization, because we are always rooted in our bodies, basically, and we're always our physical environment is so important for our well-being. So part of this process as well is about spiritualizing, consciously drawing out the Godhead within our physical environment, not realizing that there isn't a separation, but also realizing the power and importance of making our physical body, of making our home space, of making our place in the world spiritualized and harmonious, and that supports our experience of the transcendent Godhead. So that all sounds very theoretical, but I promise you it won't be. We'll step it down so that it makes sense and so that it feels very practical. But to start off with, we'll do 20 breaths just to get connected, first of all, to go inward, and then we'll talk about some of the theory, and then from there we'll go into the visualization at the end to hopefully bring it all together. So let's close our eyes. Let's start with a long deep breath through the nose or mouth, and then 4 short. Now just keep your eyes closed. Feel your physical body just as it is. And we're just going to connect into the physical body. The physical body, which is a kind of mechanism, it's a kind of avatar that we have here in this physical world. So it's got its functions, it's got its place, it roots us. So start off by feeling your heaviness, your rootedness, sense of gravity. And part of your physical body and being is also just your physical environment. So just extend your awareness into the room or the place that you are. Just become aware of the safety, the protection around you. And take your awareness even beyond just the room. Take your awareness down into the earth below. Doesn't matter if you're in an apartment, off the ground, or whether you're in a house. Just take your awareness down to the earth below and feel how that helps connect you further to Mother Earth. And take a deep breath now and just feel comfort and feel at peace within your physical body. Just feel safe, protected, and that this safety and protection allows you to let go even further, to go beyond the limitations of your material world. And now just feel your emotions, the emotions of the last 24 hours, prominent emotions of the last few weeks. Just connect, be here, be in the now. Perhaps you gently notice that these emotions don't necessarily fit this space, and just realize you can let them go to a large degree. You can choose which emotions you indulge. So for the purposes of this meditation, just let go of those emotions that are keeping you hooked out of the present moment and connect to the deeper emotion of unconditional love and gratitude just for being here, being you, for having a healthy body, for having a safe environment. And as you do this, as you let go of these old emotions, as you make more space for the emotion of love and gratitude, you just notice how this affects your body and how this allows you to relax on an even deeper level. Of course, the more you relax, the more you can open to the beyond, to the unknowable, to the mystery. So let go of the thoughts now, let go of the preoccupations, the worries, doubts, fears. There's nothing you have to do in this moment now except Be here in this moment now and relax and surrender. And as you connect in this way to your being, to your body, just expand your consciousness to your soul, your higher self. And as you expand this awareness, you become aware of the you that is intangible. The you that is perhaps not specific in thoughts or in emotions, but it's a current, a flow. It's a you that you recognize, but that perhaps you can't put words to. It feels like an expression of your truest essence. It's you beyond the ego. Perhaps now you just want to visualize this ineffable you, perhaps like a funnel that comes in through the crown of your head. From the crown of your head upwards, it expands ever outwards, ever upwards, becoming broader. And that funnel energy brings in, invites in the pure love and light of the divine that is beyond your comprehension, that is beyond what you can understand. And this is a symbolic way of picturing and experiencing how you are connected to God, Goddess. It just keeps going up and beyond and further. So maybe you just want to let go of some of the emotions, more of the emotions, or more of your ego, so that you can extend your awareness upwards, outwards more. So extending your awareness, letting in more of the mystery, channeling more of the power of who you really are. And what you find as you sit with this energy is that you are love more than you thought, perhaps in ways different to what you thought. And you find that you access higher mind, which is beyond your own personal thoughts. It's the thoughts of God, the thoughts of the beyond. And they might not be articulated, but they influence you, they carry you, they comfort you somehow. Any thoughts of overwhelm or not understanding or trying to hold on, just let them go. And breathe deeply to help this process along. Breathe deeply to go beyond who you've thought you are, even more. And as you keep expanding, you just get a sense of the divine in its purest form. But you get a sense that the divine, in its greatest extent, also knows you, recognizes you, sees you, understands you, loves you, forgives you for your humanness, forgives you for your limitations. Just as God, Goddess can forgive you, you can forgive yourself. Just allow this expanded state. And in this expanded state, just look back down, perhaps, on yourself, on your body, on your life. Perhaps there's something you notice, Maybe it's a limitation or a resistance, or maybe it's one of those beautiful qualities within you that make you unique or that are going to help you grow. Just take a look at yourself from this expanded perspective. Maybe it's something you need to be more of, or something you need to change. Perhaps it's an awareness of an old cycle ending or a new cycle beginning. But it's a taking stock, it's a seeing of yourself, just as you are, no judgments, no trying to change, just noticing. Breathe more into that. Remember this breath that is intelligent, this breath that connects you more to the divine, to your soul. Good. So now with this expanded vision, I'm just going to bring this expanded vision straight back into the body, as if all your energy and focus just comes back into the body. And having had this experience of transcending, you've touched the vastness of the divine, and the fact that you've touched that opens up space within you for more energy, for more inspiration, for more love, for more light. Just make that space within you now be revitalized, be strengthened. Just wiggle fingers and toes as you return. Open eyes when you're ready. Good. So we're going to start off by drawing a card for the month, just to get a little bit of insight as to what we're talking about, or as to what we can do, or as to what some of the issues are at this time. And we've got Demeter, which is interesting. She's a very beautiful and amazing reconciler of this very theme we're talking about today. She's the goddess of nature on the one hand, she's the goddess of abundance and agriculture, but she's also the goddess of cultivation, cultivated nature. So she's that energy of self-cultivation, of cultivating the divine spark so that it can go from a small spark into a fire, and not a fire that's burning out of control, but a fire that cooks, a fire that transmutes, a fire that takes something from a raw state to a higher state, a more concentrated state. So that's, she's very much the goddess of initiation into the mysteries. And again, that's kind of literally what we're going to be talking about today. It's taking the vast and the ineffable, finding the technologies and the means to experience that mystery, but then to be able to bring that mystery back into our bodies and our lives, and to be able to live that day to day. So it takes something that is very inhuman, mysterious, and it turns it into something that is very human and tangible, while not losing any of the magic, while not losing any of the mystery. So I think it's always so appropriate the way that the cards come up. And Demeter is the patroness of, very specifically, the mysteries of Eleusis, which were the most important mystery initiations in the ancient world, in the ancient Greek and Roman world, certainly. And the story there is of the constant natural order of being born in spring, flourishing in summer, dying in winter, and then being reborn in spring. So that takes us to the cyclical time, the cycles of natural time, as opposed to our intellectually imposed concept of linear time, whereby we're young and then we become old, or whereby something moves from point A to point B. And that's kind of a very unforgiving time cycle, because that linear time doesn't allow rebirth, whereas the cyclical time always reminds us, after winter there will be spring. In the death, if we're spiritual and if we work on ourselves, there will be rebirth. So the death isn't the end. And of course, we can step that up or step that down to smaller cycles, cycles of death and rebirth within our lives, and of course, our actual physical death in which we are reborn. But the message always of the mystery schools, all of them, in all the different cultures, was as you die to your ego in this life, you become reborn through your spirituality, and that is a rehearsal for your death when your physical body dies, so that you can be conscious in your death. And it's almost, to me, if I kind of look at these mystery schools messages, that's kind of one of the big purposes of the mystery schools, is first of all to learn rebirth in this life, but then second of all to remember ourselves after we die, so that our soul doesn't have to go into the cycle of constant rebirth. It's almost like reincarnation is this principle of, okay, so you die and then you forget yourself, so then you have to come back. So then you die again and then you forget yourself, you have to come back again. Whereas if we can remember ourselves, if we can remember the vastness of the divine as we die, we can then merge with that divine. We are no longer held by the attachments of the physical life and the physical incarnation. So when we die symbolically during our lifetimes, we are letting go of attachments, little bit by little bit by little bit. And I know most of you, probably all of you who've worked with deep trance, with breath work, with teacher plants, you've been through this, where you get that feeling of letting go a little bit more of the attachments. And usually our attachments are to stupid things, to our old traumas, to the old junk. We hold on. And sometimes we're also attached to the things that we love and that enchant us, but it's literally that. We get enchanted, we get distracted by some of the things of this world. And I'm kind of going off on this tangent because it's going to bring us back to our theme in a moment. So, this physical world, which relates to this principle of the spirits of nature, is very much about attachment and embodiment in this world. So, for example, the nymphs, which are spirits of different places. You can have the dryads in the Greek system, which are the spirits of the trees. The nymphs themselves will be related to particular mountains and lakes. And then you've got the oceanids and the nereids, for example, who are also linked to different oceans and seas and rivers. So they are like archetypes, spirits of place that keep living on, that obviously live longer than we do as mortals. Our mortal life and existence, relatively speaking, is way shorter than the life of a river, for example, or the life of a mountain. But our lesson as humans is to learn and understand that we are not those immortal things. Our attachments, we try to be immortal. We try to perpetuate some of our experiences and our attachments, especially to places of beauty. And that's one of the ways in which we lose ourselves. And that's one of the ways in which we get stuck and embodied here. So that takes me back to the original point that I wanted to make, which, if we look at maybe a scheme of what is the divine, how do the different gods, goddesses, angels, archetypes fit into this bigger picture of the divine. And we've also, at this time in our evolution as humans, more than ever, I would say, we have this dichotomy between, our cultural religions, the religions that we grew up in, and I wouldn't say universal religion, but maybe a more cosmic understanding of our place in the world. So we're kind of caught in this dichotomy of, which is real? Is the sort of folk cultural stuff real? Where we talk about spirits and we talk about, the spirit of the nature and of the plants. And then how does the greater Godhead fit into that picture? And of course, it's all one. First of all, the Godhead infuses everything. It's like the Godhead is in the pores of everything. But that Godhead, the transcendent Godhead, is so vast that it is beyond our sort of very small microcosmic experience. But I would say the very purpose of us being here, incarnating, having some sort of individual consciousness, is that we can experience the greater macrocosm, Godhead, from the perspective of our little microcosm. And obviously, everything, can scale up infinitely. If, we are a very small part, our individual consciousness here is a very small part of our soul consciousness. And, our soul, we could say, has many different expressions in different lives, future, past, concurrent lives in different places. So the soul is vast compared to our individual experience here. And in the same way, our soul is minuscule when compared to the bigger, Godhead. But the Godhead, the impersonal God, infuses everything. And it's one could say it's basically the divine or atomic light that makes all matter and creation possible. But then, and going back to the model that I suggested before, if we go to one of the Hindu models or understandings of creation, the basic principle is that you've got Brahman, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer, and the agent of rebirth. So it's the destroyer, but it's also the regeneration that takes us back to creation. So one could say that Brahman energy, which isn't very different to the Shiva energy. The Shiva takes us back out of the created world, back into the potential of Brahman. But the great creator God, the ineffable, which is in everything, which is impersonal, is way beyond our comprehension as individuals. But Brahman then made the creation, and then Vishnu is the God of sustaining and maintaining the creation. And that realm of Vishnu is very much this world. It's very much the world of Mother Earth. It's the world of nature. It's the world of our creations as humans within this world. It's very much the God of our cares within this world. When we pray for protection, or when we pray for help, or when we pray for transformation, it's all happening within life, basically, within this sustenance of life, which is the Vishnu realm. And then at some point, we will go to Shiva, which is the god of death and rebirth. So we have to go via Shiva into death in order to be reborn back into the ineffable, or the realm beyond the realm of Vishnu. So when we talk about the spirits of nature, we're talking within a very specific sphere of experience. We're speaking about this stage, Mother Earth, physical creation, physical reality. Within that, of course, again, there are different scales of mortality. So, we've got us as mortals, we're kind of the smallest. And then we've got, for example, the nymphs, the dryads, the nereids, etc. And then on a sort of higher level, we go to Pan, the god Pan, which is the god of nature, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then beyond even that, we could say we've got Mother Earth, Gaia, which is the bigger consciousness that creates the stage for all these different levels of consciousness. So Gaia is kind of the big impersonal, Gaia is a microcosmic manifestation of Vishnu, and we've chosen to experience ourselves and our lives in this place of Gaia. So, Gaia herself is the bigger picture, the stage, and then we've got the smaller principles, the mountains, the rivers, the oceans, all of which have their own consciousness, and all of which might be represented by a tutelary god or nymph or spirit. But what's very beautiful about this is that, of course, Gaia and, let's say, the mountains or the different oceans, they are not just, lumps of stone or bodies of water. They actually have a consciousness. They have a principle that rules them, or a theme that carries them. And this for me became very clear when I read somewhere, for example, that just as human beings, or people who speak, have different accents, in the way they speak their language, birds and animals can be found to have different regional accents. So, birds of the same species, living in different parts of the world, there's a different accent to the way that they chirp, let's say. And the same goes for us as humans. Why is it that people who start off with one language, why is there an evolution or a change in the accent, even after a very little time? The US was colonized by the British, and the British spoke one way, and now the Americans speak a very different way, and it's only in a matter of a few hundred years. And I really do believe that that is the influence of the land, of the region, spirit of the region, influencing what's happening in human beings' bodies, and therefore in their consciousnesses, and therefore in the way that they speak and express themselves. So our environment, where we live, the food that feeds us, has an influence, obviously, on our experience. But again, in the modern world, we've tended to become very utilitarian. Food is only about feeding the body, and we don't need to think about, for example, or certainly in a materialistic way, we don't need to think about the spirit of the plant that was grown. Was that plant happy? All that we worry about in a modernistic sense is a piece of lettuce that looks good to put in the supermarket so that it will sell, as opposed to what is really the spirit of that plant. So when we start to think about and believe that places, as well as plants, as well as specific land forms, have consciousnesses, have nymphs, I'll just call them nymphs just for the sake of simplicity, that starts to allow us to have a relationship and interaction with the land, which is beyond just living there. It's revering it. It's understanding that as a consciousness, as an entity, we can communicate with a tree or with a rock, and that tree or rock can convey information to us, and we can call on that tree, for example, to grow better. If we send it love, we can ask it to bear us fruit, but in return we will give it good nourishment. But we will also, give it our love. We'll also give it our conscious attention. So that's when we start to also become cultivators. And this takes us back to Demeter. It's not just about giving the right fertilizer. It's about respecting the spirit of the land or the plant, acknowledging it as part of a higher entity. It's not just an individual tree or plant. It fits into a bigger species, let's say, but that species in itself has an oversoul. So we can start creating a relationship with the oversoul, for example, so that we can be inspired, that we can be informed, but also, for example, that we can be strong, that we can be more healthy, that we can be protected. And the principle, very basic principle of sacred space in the early cults and religions was, first of all, certain caves or grottos or forests were seen to be particularly sacred. And I would say that's because the early peoples could feel the energy, and one could say on the one hand, okay, maybe the spirits there are just more powerful than in other places. Or one could say that there are some sort of geological or geographical power places, on the surface of Mother Earth or within Mother Earth that make certain places more powerful, and therefore these have become, sacred places. And I know that all temples, or most temples, most churches, especially the very old ones, especially the ones that have many layers of construction, were built on places that the ancient people really understood to be places of power. And then those temples and churches were built on top of them, maybe first of all as shrines, but second of all as, those shrines kind of being markers. But second of all, as those temples became more complex, they started to contain the energy, not for exclusion or for exclusivity, but let's say if there's this beam of energy coming out of the earth from a particular rock or mountain, if you build a temple on top and you use certain technologies like using arches and domes, and if you cover those walls in gold and silver, the gold and silver, for example, helps contain that energy or magnify that energy. So that building of those temples was, it followed certain architectural technologies to enhance those power places, so that when we as humans and mortals entered them, there was a particular intention set inside that temple that could then help us kind of transcend and have a spiritual experience. So in a way, it's kind of one of those paradoxes, using a very physical place to ultimately transcend and to have an experience of the highest God or goddess. So, certain places have been seen to be more sacred than others, let's say, and humans have learned how to cultivate some of those energies, turning those places into even more sacred places. And this is something that we can really see very clearly, for example, in places like Peru, where you've got these beautiful mountains. Temples are built in specific spots within those mountains, but then also certain mountains look like the profile of a person, or certain mountains might have formations that look like eagles or jaguars. And then the Peruvian peoples, not necessarily only the Incas, there were many civilizations before the Incas, they would then carve some of those natural formations to look a little bit more like an eagle, for example. And they might build a temple in a particular place that maybe looks like the eye of an eagle. So they then start to actually enhance the natural landscape. But they would always have done that in alignment with the spirits of the place, with the spirits of the mountain. So the human awareness is coming in and working with the raw energy of the spirit of place in order to create something even more magical. And I think that's really how early civilization grew and developed, was this understanding of the relationship between nature and human consciousness. And humans therefore being channels of divine consciousness. Our souls come in with a memory and with certain spiritual technologies. They come in, and then in that they have the inspiration within this physical world to then terraform, to enhance the energies of this physical world, which were then seen as means to go back to God, to go back beyond the physical, back to the divine. So I think the principle of spirits of nature is, and one could argue that in the very beginning people started to develop an awareness of spirituality because they were at the mercy of nature, and that maybe they started to personify certain aspects like storms or droughts or floods, were perhaps seen as the wrath of the gods. That's one way of looking at it. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think, very early on, religion and the principle of magic and the principle of prayer developed when humans believed or thought or tried to influence their environment, influence the spirits of nature. And that kind of, in some ways, can be seen as a quid pro quo relationship where, the human will say, well, if I make an offering to you, spirit of nature, I pray that we have good crops, next year, or I pray that our community thrives, etc. So it's that creation of a relationship, which is, I think, very fundamental to human spirituality. And of course, shamanism ties in with that. And if we take shamanism as one of the sort of root expressions of spirituality, we could say perhaps shamanism was developed in a time when we as humans were more directly connected to nature, where we weren't living in cities and probably, even permanent houses, where we weren't nomadic. Sort of being more or less nomadic, I would say, was part of the state of shamanistic belief and religion. And then at some point, it so happened that humans had to start living in cities. And when this happened, certainly in the beginning, that sacred relationship would have remained. And we can see that in the cities of India, the cities of places like Peru, the cities of Egypt. There was still very much a sense of connection to the divinities and nature. But the very nature of the divinities started to change. Gods and goddesses were no longer perhaps storm gods and goddesses or weather gods and goddesses. They became, more abstract principles like the principle of justice or the principle of abundance and prosperity. And, they were personified more according to the needs of city life. And, I would certainly say, and, there are not only proven theories, I would say, that, certain cities, certainly cities like, let's say, Varanasi in India, which is considered to be one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, those cities were laid out to represent, let's say, the chakra system or the energy system of a human. Machu Picchu itself, when seen from above, looks like a condor. And the city of Cusco in Peru also looks like a jaguar. It's laid out in a particular way. You've got the head, you've got the tail, and the head and the tail, etc., represent different functions, spiritual functions, as well as worldly functions. Maybe, and I'm not saying this is literally the case in Cusco, but, maybe the priesthood would live in the head part, or the king would live in the head part, and different functions of society would live in the other parts. So in that way, the actual physical space of the city was laid out according to some sort of spiritual principle. And those principles were respected for a long time. But then, of course, at some point, cities lost that sort of layout. And, I think that's obviously what we see now. Our cities don't have a particular meaning. We've got a financial district and suburbia, etc. But that doesn't follow a higher spiritual principle. But, very early on, the temples were laid out as sacred space. So as soon as you stepped out of the city into the temple, you stepped into the realm, the home of the gods. So you stepped out of the mundane into the divine. And those temples, of course, also held the spirits of place, held the spirits of nature in them. And for example, Rome itself, as a Western example, was laid out in that way. The central part of Rome was a very large sacred space that was laid out by the priests. And that sacred space was respected through, until almost the end of the history of Rome. But, even nowadays, when one goes to Rome and you're kind of attuned to the energies there. I mean, the sacredness of Rome, even though it's kind of become more associated with Catholicism, that original intent is still very strong, because you still have those stones, you still have those hills, the 7 hills of Rome, which demarcate a sacred space. And those hills of Rome, they each have their own energy. And obviously, a hill is more perennial than a building. So they're still holding that very ancient intent, which is very tangible in a place like Rome. So, this principle of spirits of nature isn't only about, being in a forest or enjoying a place out in nature. The spirits of nature are part of our very nature here. And again, going back to this principle of they are part of the body or the being or the life of Vishnu, again, we have this principle that while we're alive and as we become more conscious, within this living body, we can affect and have a relationship with these spirits. When we die, when we transcend, it becomes a different relationship. When we meditate and do our spiritual practice, we can use the support of this physical world in order to help us transcend, because there is no dichotomy. There is no difference between, let's say, meditating, that we always have the potential to meditate in the middle of the city and to be able to reach the divine as much as we can do so in the middle of a forest, if we are sort of attuned in the right way. But of course, it's a whole lot easier to feel the presence of the divine when we're in a forest or, by the sea, for example. So that all then becomes a matter of how we attune ourselves, how we discipline ourselves, how we discipline our bodies and our consciousness. But there is also obviously something to be said for the actual influence of the tree that we sit next to. Again, it's like, being next to another person. When we sit with a person, we can have a real dialogue and a real connection, as opposed to sitting with the photo of someone, sort of a sense of distance. So, when we do go into nature, when we're directly connected to the spirits of nature, we create a direct relationship. We enter into that mode directly, and we can kind of become immersed in that place, in that consciousness, in order to teach us something. So, that is why it always becomes really important for us to, on the one hand, make our space that we live in sacred, to acknowledge the earth, to acknowledge the natural aspects within our space, our physical space. But at the same time, in order for us to become, multidimensional, multifaceted beings, we also need to spend time in nature itself, to be immersed in the trees, or to be immersed in the spirit of the ocean, for example. And as we gain all of these different experiences, we start to learn by experience how they all lead us back to the one, how these are different expressions of the one in different physical forms. Our physical bodies being part of the Vishnu experience resonate directly with anything else that is physical around us. So yes, there's that physical aspect, the resonance, but on the other hand, we are also non-physical beings, we are spiritual beings, and we can then also learn to go more into that cosmic experience. But it's kind of a dialogue that we learn. It's kind of a process that we learn. As I said, it's on the one hand, it's learning certain techniques and disciplines spiritually, but it's also having a broad range of experiences of learning directly from plants, from certain rocks, etc., from going to different sacred places, feeling the energy of sacred places. It's through that broadness of experience that we learn, but ultimately it's all eventually going to take us back to the divine. And that is why our work with breath work, with trance, with teacher plants also contributes to that experience of transcendence, as well as very specific a plant or place that has an influence on us. So now we'll just do a visualization to connect a little bit more to our place where we live, where we are now. And just very briefly, all the ancient cultures, they had their family altar, and it was more than just having an altar where you meditate, like the one I've got here, for example. The family altar would have basically been the fire, the fireplace where the cooking was done, and where the family gods were maybe displayed. Maybe there were a few little statues, maybe there was a consecrated space. And it was very real for those people. They would make offerings into the fire. They would give some of their food, to the fire. And that fire, and in the Roman religion, that was called the lararium. That was where the focus of all the family worship was. And that family worship, on the one hand, was worshipping the gens, which is the genius or the higher self of the particular family or clan. So that's basically worshipping or acknowledging the ancestors. And then you would also have the gods of the actual place, of the actual home. And very importantly, and I think this goes for most old cultures, the pantry was kind of the most important place of the home, because that was where all the wealth, that was where all the food was kept. So the Romans, for example, had spirits of the pantry that they would revere and pray for protection of that food, of that family wealth, in order to continue and to sustain the flourishing of the family. So it was it's a very different concept of wealth to what we have in terms of having a bank account and having this abstract number that represents how much we have or how much longer we can live on. So that home pantry was a very tangible measure of our wealth and our flourishing. So making offerings to that was so important, because it was about protecting that and sustaining that. So when we talk about this principle of spirits of nature, it's not only the raw nature, but it's also of what's around us and what's very tangible to us. And the spirits that go from, let's say, being a cave to then eventually becoming something like a home and a pantry and a fireplace. They still hold those very specific spirits, and they've just been transferred from one place to another. So the same goes for where we live in our homes. Our homes are sacred places, and yes, our altars are sacred, but there are so many different aspects to our actual home. So we're going to do a little visualization, just working with this a little bit now before we close. So let's just close our eyes, and let's just take a few long deep breaths just to connect in. And just keep breathing in this way, longer and deeper than normal. And just starting off with your body, remembering your body is your home, the home of your soul in this physical world. So as you breathe into your body, again, just feel what's happening there. And then as you breathe, just expand your awareness as you did at the beginning of this session to encompass the room, the place that you're sitting. So perhaps as you breathe in this way, you just become aware of where the windows are. Maybe you know this already, but maybe you also sense it. Be aware of where there are sofas or chairs, where the walls are. And now, just expand your consciousness to your full home or apartment. Being aware of the bounds, the outer walls which mark your sacred space. And then keep breathing deeply, keep expanding your awareness, perhaps just to your garden, or if you live in an apartment block, to the full building and the property of the apartment block. But keeping your consciousness focused on your actual home, the outer walls of your home. Perhaps you start off by noticing some sort of spirit of your home. Maybe it's an energy. Maybe it's a way of being that you feel when you're in your home. And this might differ from room to room. So maybe you find one room holds one energy, and another room has another spirit. But just get a sense of, within your home, be it a home or an apartment, just get a sense of where there is a place of power within your home, where you either feel most empowered, or you feel most relaxed, or you most feel the presence of the divine. So let your intuition, your feeling sense guide you, so that you can understand where the places are that uplift you and strengthen you and protect you. And maybe you can call upon your soul or your higher self or your higher knowing, and just ask if there's anything else you can do to enhance this place of power within your home, or what you can do perhaps to enhance protection or well-being of your home in general. Maybe it means rearranging furniture, or changing colors of walls, or placing crystals in different places. And maybe now, with this expanded awareness, you also get a sense of, if at all, there is a place that is perhaps negative, or where your energy is drained, or where energy leaks, or you feel disempowered. So let the spirit of your home, of your lar, talk to you, guide you in this regard. And if there is a place that feels like it's lower frequency, get a sense of what you can do to balance that. It could be an offering that you make to that spirit, if you see it in that way. Or again, it could be a rearrangement of furniture or colors, placing crystals, doing feng shui. What can you do to balance that energy? So keep breathing, and now just focus back in on your body. As you focus back in on your body, just give gratitude for the spirit of your home that protects you, that makes you warm, that shelters, that is a symbol of your flourishing, of your safety. It's a home for your soul to grow. Give thanks to your body, the home of your soul. And again, just getting the feeling of what can be done to make the spirits of your home reflect more of your purpose in life. How your home can become more of a stage for your growth. Give thanks to your soul now. Perhaps there are other archetypes or spirits that you're aware of working with you. Just take a deep breath as you start to return. Seeing your home with new eyes. Feeling your body in a new way, feeling whole and complete. Good, thank you everyone. Remember, next year in February, I'm going to be co-facilitating with Patricia a trip to Bali, in which we'll explore the beauty and sacredness of Bali with breath work. And so if you're interested in joining us for that, if you want more information, please contact me via email or Signal. But I just want to thank everyone for a beautiful year so far. It's been so wonderful seeing you, the people that I did see recently in Europe and America. It was so special. And I'm really looking forward to this journey. It really feels like I really feel that as a collective, even though we're going through these difficult times and these transitions, we've kind of made a step in the right direction, and we're going in the right direction. So we just got to keep holding and hanging together, and I really do think the light and the love is breaking through more now than it has ever before. So thank you everyone, wonderful to see you, and
Thank you, Zach.
we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Ciao.